and welcome to my kitchen. Let's talk about how to maintain your sourdough starter. These are tips and tricks that I've learned over the years. As if you've watched my sourdough pizza crust video, you would know that I've had my starter for about 10 years. My mom gave me this starter from her batch, and when she gave me hers, she'd had it for about 20 or 25 years. So this is a really old California sourdough starter that I have, being that I'm from California. And so I want to talk with you about what you can do with your starter. So first you'll notice that I have it in a ceramic cookie jar, and I keep it covered with cheesecloth. The reason I do that is just to make sure that nothing gets in there. I don't have any issue here at my house and my sourdough starter with gnats or fruit flies, but my mom in California, she does. And so that's one reason why she keeps hers covered as well. So I just keep mine covered just to keep it clean, especially when I have it out on the countertop, as I do right now during the coronavirus health crisis. I'm not really putting it back in the fridge at the moment, so I want to just make sure that I keep it clean. One of the reasons I have the cheesecloth on here and not the original lid to the cookie jar is because the sourdough starter is a living organism. The yeast is alive, and it needs air to breathe and to stay alive. So I'm trying to make sure I don't kill it. So as I mentioned, I have it in a ceramic cookie jar container. You never ever want to keep your sourdough starter in anything plastic. So if you have a ceramic jar, a pottery bowl, a glass jar, those are all really good. And my personal preference is to have something with a wide mouth. So when I take my cheesecloth off here, you'll see if I hold this up and I have my hand near it, you can see about how big the opening of my jar is. This serves multiple purposes. First, it's easy to get a soup ladle in and out if I want to remove starter to make something. It's easy when I feed it to have my hand close to the mouth and stirring it. So it just works really well for me. Another tip that I've learned from over the years having my sourdough starter, and probably my mom told me as well, is when you're stirring it, I try to always use just a regular metal spoon. I try not to use plastic or wood. And when I'm stirring it, I will then tap the spoon on the edge of my cookie jar. And you'll notice, if you saw in my previous video, that I have a little chip. It's because I was going like this and I hit it too hard and I chipped my cookie jar. So try not to do that with your jar. Anyway, you never want to use your finger to clean off the spoon into your jar of sourdough starter, because you don't want any oils or anything from your skin getting in your sourdough starter. So resist that temptation. Just lightly tap it and then, be done with it. So what I do with my starter when I'm not using it is I will cover it with the cheesecloth and I'll put it back in my refrigerator. And because I generally keep about a third of starter in my jar here, so probably about this much, I can leave it in my refrigerator for about 2 weeks and it'll still be alive, but it goes a bit dormant in the refrigerator. So then when I want to use it, I have to plan in advance and take it out of the refrigerator at least 5 to 7 days before I want to use the starter. And when you take it out of the refrigerator, you'll notice that, well, this is not a good example because mine has been out of the refrigerator for quite a while. But when you take it out, you would notice that it would have like a thick crust on the top of it. Don't worry, that doesn't mean it's dead, but it does mean that it's maybe starving a little bit. So what you can do, and what I do, is I just take a kitchen spoon and I'll scrape the top of that thick layer off. I'll put that in a bag and toss it out, and then I'll immediately feed my starter. But I always wait until it has come up to room temperature. So it would be like this: take it out of the fridge, let it come to room temperature, scrape off the thick, hard stuff off of the surface, discard that, and then feed your starter. And when you're feeding your starter, some people ask me, well, how much do I feed my starter? And I think it confuses people that are new to having sourdough starter when I say, well, however much you want, because that doesn't really give you any kind of guidance, right? So what I do is, let's say, for example, I want to make my sourdough pizza crust, and I want to make pizzas for Saturday night dinner. So the weekend before, like maybe Sunday afternoon, I'll take my starter out of the fridge, I'll let it come to room temperature. If it has developed that thick crust on the inside on top, I'll scrape that out, then I'll feed it. And when I feed it, I'll start feeding it twice a day, morning and evening. And I'll give it, at that time, I'll give it a half a cup of food. So that's what I'm going to do now, and I'll show you how I do that. So I just use half a cup of flour, and then I get a half a cup of tepid water. So it's always a 1-for-1 ratio of tepid water and flour. You don't want cold water, and you don't want hot, so I just have to let it run for a minute. Okay. All right. Then I take my metal spoon and I'll stir it up. Break my jar because I learned my lesson about that a while ago. And see now, okay, you can see it now. It's got some bubbles, but I just stirred it up, so it'll take a minute for all the bubbles to come back. But if I look in there, there's a whole bunch of bubbles. So when you see bubbles in your sourdough starter, that is a great sign. That's what you want. That means the yeast is active, and mine is bubbling right away. Now the reason I keep a much bigger container than the quantity of sourdough is because when the sourdough starter is really active, it gets really bubbly. And if you feed it twice a day for a week, your quantity will grow, and you always have to leave room in your container for the bubbly process. There's probably a more technical term for it than that, but that's what I call it. You don't want this sourdough starter to bubble up and out of your container, and you'll have a big mess. So that's how you feed it. And when we are feeding the sourdough starter, you want to use an unbleached flour. I prefer, because I've been using it for 10 years now that I've had my starter, to use King Arthur brand unbleached flour. And it's their, it comes in a blue and white packaging, and it says King Arthur bread flour. It's okay if you don't use King Arthur brand. Just make sure that whatever flour you use, it's unbleached. So that's my tip about the flour. And then regarding your feeding schedule, as I mentioned, if I wanted to make pizzas for dinner on Saturday night, and I took my starter out the weekend before on Sunday afternoon or so, I would start feeding it half a cup every evening and every morning. But maybe you don't want it to get super active, so maybe you feed it a half a cup one day a week, once a day for that week. If you don't see it getting really bubbly, then it's probably not going to be as active as you'd like it to be when you mix up your dough for your pizza crust. So keep this in mind. The more you feed it, the more quickly it will become very active and very bubbly. So if you want to just have it out for a little bit and you're doing a couple things here and there, you can feed it a little less, or you can feed it a little less frequently. Now sometimes when I have it out on the countertop, I forget about it. Like let's say it's during the middle of the week and I'm working a lot at my day job and I'm working late, and sometimes I'll come home one evening and I think, oh, what's that smell? And I'm thinking, oh, did my husband forget to take the trash out? But no, it's not the husband's fault. It's my sourdough starter because it's hungry. So if you ever walk into your kitchen or you open up your fridge and you smell something kind of funny and it reminds you of, oh, I got to take the trash out, or maybe there's a potato that's rotting in a bowl, that kind of smell, it's probably your sourdough starter, and it just means that it's hungry. So that's when you want to make sure you feed it. And it'll smell like that if you have a really active starter and you've got it out on the countertop for, you've had it out on your countertop for multiple days or more than a week, and you forget to feed it for maybe 4 days, 5 days. You'll smell that smell, and that's what it'll be. So not to worry, once you feed it again, that smell will go away and you'll just smell your yummy, healthy sourdough starter. And people sometimes don't realize that the sourdough starter has its own smell. Unfortunately, I can't transmit to you the smell through the video, but take a whiff of your starter and get to be familiar with what it smells like when it's healthy and bubbly. And so those are my tips on how to maintain your sourdough starter. I hope you'll enjoy yours at home. And if you're any of my local family or friends that would like some sourdough starter, I'd be happy to share it with you. I can drop it off on your porch because right now during the coronavirus crisis, we have to maintain our social distance. But I'm happy to porch bomb you and leave some sourdough starter. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed my video. If so, please give me a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel. During the coronavirus crisis, I'm planning to post a lot more videos on different recipes that I'm cooking during this period that we're eating at home every day. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.